let's get into it. We're talking about guys that are just higher end. They're top tier, but we want them. So let's see how we can get them. We're going to look at some actual trades. Bob, we're going to start off with New York Jets running back Breece Hall. I mean, this is a guy who's productive with no quarterback. Yeah. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers comes back to some Green Bay Packers Aaron Rodgers form. Yeah.
You nailed it with Breece Hall. I mean, no team around him last year. I mean, Garrett Wilson obviously out there, but not performing to the best of his ability with the quarterback play that was trotted out there. But Breece Hall, definitely a piece we want to get our hands on.
Let's look at the first trade. This is a 12-team Superflex start 10. It's a half-point PPR, and it is a half-point tight end premium. And it's Breece Hall for DK Metcalf, the 109, the 209. I don't hate it, but I really hate giving up Breece Hall.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one where the value is probably about right on this deal, but I don't know if the schematics of this deal get me excited enough to move off Breece. That's something I talk about a lot in the Discord, is just sometimes deals make sense value-wise, but the schematics just don't check out. So in this one, if I'm making the pivot off Breece Hall, I can't imagine I'm a competitive team anymore. I can't imagine I have enough running backs kicking around that Breece Hall is a liquid asset for me. Yeah. So I'm obviously trying to do something else. I'm trying to pivot. I'm trying to rebuild, retool, whatever the case is. So I'm not competitive, but I'm adding DK Metcalf, which is best suited for a competitive team, despite not being that old. He's still older. If you're about to go into rebuild with DK Metcalf, assuming that rebuild takes about 2 years, DK is on the, he'll be 28 by that time. That's a less exciting wide receiver to have. So instead of DK, can I put into this deal to kind of maybe fix it up a way that makes me a little bit more excited? Instead of DK, can I manage adding Chris Olave to this deal? And in turn, I probably lose that first round pick. So it probably just ends up being Chris Olave and the 209 for Breece Hall. That would get me much more excited to move off Breece Hall. I feel a lot more secure long-term with Chris Olave in whatever my build is. But like I said, if I'm moving Breece, I'm probably not competitive. I'd rather have Chris Olave personally.
Yeah, one way to think about it too is you might just want to not get any players in return if your team is absolute garbage.
Sure.
Maybe you want to productive struggle, tank, whatever you want to call it. In which case, I think I'd rather just give me a bunch of picks for next year. I'll find some 0 RB guy, that I could trade for cheaply. Yeah, you're still getting a talented wide receiver in his 20s, but
sure,
I would prefer a younger, higher ceiling wide receiver like a Chris Olave, like Bob alluded to. So I like that portion a little bit better there. And again, let's not forget, Breece Hall is a really good receiving back as well. And that's going to kind of lead to my point for this next trade here. Trade number 2, Breece Hall for Zay Flowers and a 25 first. I just checked. Last year, Zay Flowers had 77 receptions. Breece Hall had 76. Breece Hall, the number 2 running back overall. So, I mean, now obviously the yardage is a lot different. Zay Flowers had 858 and Breece had 591, but still, you understand where I'm coming from there, right?
Yeah,
still had 76 points in just a PPR format. But in this format here, is full PPR, Superflex 12 team, start 10 PPR, half-point tight end premium. But Bob, your thoughts on this one first.
Yeah, I definitely want a bit more for Breece Hall than just Zay Flowers and a 25 first, but maybe add on a distant second as well, maybe like a 26 second, maybe a 25 second. And I'm hoping that these picks are adjacent to the team getting Breece Hall. Obviously, if they're getting Breece Hall, they're probably looking to compete. So I'm hoping that these picks aren't that teams. I'm hoping there are another teams, a third-party team that I'm getting the picks of that are hopefully a little bit more mid to early. So I feel a little bit better about moving this because as much as I love Zay Flowers, and I think a big thing for both of us, Mike, is moving Breece Hall is not nothing. I mean, and that's the deal with all these players. It's not nothing moving them. I mean, Breece Hall, you just alluded to it, or you just mentioned it, 76 receptions last year, just absolutely bonkers. It's tough moving them. I definitely, and in all negotiations when we're in the Discord, I say, hey, go for the throat, go for more. The worst that can happen is that the trade just doesn't happen. You don't need to make 90% of all trades. It's just really nice if you do. Worst case, they just walk away from the table. Second worst case, they just come back with the same offer. Maybe they tweak the offer a little bit to give themselves a bit more back. Who knows? But this is a tough one. I definitely want to go for as much as I can to make it feel like I'm getting a better deal here, especially if those picks seem late. I definitely want to, maybe tack on a couple seconds if they're both from a team that is looking mighty strong now that they added Breece Hall.
And it's hard to cross positions sometimes, going from a top tier running back to a top tier wide receiver still. But if you're coming at me with Zay Flowers for Breece Hall, you're going to have to really load that trade up more. Or, we'll do a tier down for a running back, and then I'll add on to it from there personally.
Sure.
So would you feel better if it was like, say, Breece Hall for Zay Flowers, and let's look at how these guys finished last year? Like, I don't know. What about if it was James Cook? Talking running back 12 on the season last year, and you're getting a top tier wide receiver. Would that move the needle for you?
It wouldn't do it for me, but I could see how that would get some people going. Depends how you feel about James Cook. I'm still 50-50 on him. I'll admit he fared a lot better in version 2.0 of my 2024 projections, but
good last year.
Yeah, I think I have him as a top 15 running back, but I don't know. It depends. In a start 10, I'm kind of interested, but again, I think it's one I just say, nah, that's not enough for me. Go back to the drawing board kind of a deal.
Let's move on to the next one. Now, this one's hard for me because he has yet to play a down of NFL football, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. Let's look at this first trade here. Superflex 12 teams, start 10, PPR, half-point tight end premium. And this trade is Marvin Harrison Jr. for Garrett Wilson, Will Levis, and a 25-second. There's a lot to unpack here, Bob.
This is one that, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. and Garrett Wilson are close enough where in a super flex league, especially, Will Levis and a 25-second on top of Garrett Wilson is a bit of an overpay for Marvin Harrison. As much as I love Marvin Harrison Jr. and I believe he'll be a top 10 dynasty wide receiver producing like one before long, I think they're too close to throw that much on top. I think it's an overpay. I think probably take off Will Levis, add a third to Marvin Harrison. That probably squares up this deal. In my opinion, I think throwing the quarterback around, and I'm not super high on Will Levis. Like, I'm just not. For me, I feel like that's saying a lot that you have to take the quarterback out of this deal because it makes it too overpowered for one side. And ultimately, these are some kinds of trades that, in my opinion, leagues are kind of won and lost on, or can get people some real riled up in the comments, the league chat. But definitely for me, I think it's an overpay. I don't think you have to go that hard. I think move Marvin Harrison at a third for Garrett Wilson at a second. That's probably about right. And you could argue that second and third should be flipped the other way too, in my opinion. You could argue it the other way, but I think Marvin Harrison regularly ahead of Garrett Wilson in most ranks. So,
I don't hate the package here. If I have Marvin Harrison Jr. and someone's offering this package to me, I'm going to give it a really, really good long thought. That being said, what I like to do too is you just drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. He was either the 101 or 102. In this case, Superflex League, probably the 102. I think we could agree on that. Caleb Williams most likely went first. So essentially you are trading that pick for this, essentially. Do you think that's a good value? Will Levis is a buy for me this offseason. If he does anything, if he finishes as a mid quarterback too, he's a buy for me. You could get him pretty cheap right now. I would definitely give it some thought here. I'm excited to see what Garrett Wilson could do. I do think it is an overpay. Bob, we got another Marvin Harrison Jr. trade here. Another Superflex League, 12 teams, start 10, PPR, half-point tight end premium. So essentially the same thing as what we just had. But Marvin Harrison for Brandon Ayuk and a 25-second. I don't know if this is enough for me, Bob.
It's definitely not enough for me. With Ayuk in his current situation, we could look ahead at this in a couple weeks. If Brandon Ayuk is traded even next year, if Brandon Ayuk is moved somewhere else, and we could feel very differently about this, I doubt that we would, because I think by then Marvin Harrison Jr. will have more to his name than just being a rookie walking out of an NFL field for the first time. This just isn't enough for me. But it's tough to find proper value because you can't change the 25-second to a first because that would be too much. So you either have to make it a first and then you add a second to Marvin Harrison to try to square that up a little bit. That seems okay, but it's tough. It might be adding another second, adding a player of similar consequence. I don't know, but this is a tough one to move off of for me. These are two pieces that are just a little tough to get a good value between, enough value to bridge the gap that isn't too much, too little, especially with everything that's up in the air with Brandon Ayuk. And I think that's the big kind of wrench in the fly in the ointment, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I like the first trade better. And if this is the offer, I'm just going to keep Marvin Harrison Jr. or give me a better wide receiver. Not saying that Brandon Ayuk's bad, but you have to think about value here. And right now, Marvin Harrison Jr. is valued out higher than Brandon Ayuk. So it was tough for me, Bob. I feel like you did this to me on purpose. Detroit Lions tight end Sam Laporta. Let's talk about the first trade. Superflex League, 12 teams start 9, half-point PPR, no tight end premium. So a tight end trade with no premium. It's okay. Tight ends need love too. And this is Sam Laporta for TJ Hawkinson and a 26 first. If you listen to the last pod, they're thinking at least a month into the season until TJ Hawkinson is ready. Could be more. You never know with stuff like that. Bob, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this one?
This in a non-tight end premium, this is tough to not call an overpay for these players. However, I will admit, again, this is schematically, I don't love the deal because you're getting TJ Hawkinson, who is not a ready-to-go tight end. So you're kind of pushed into a situation where you're probably, if you want TJ Hawkinson, you either have a great number 2 option behind Sam Laporta already that can start week 1 through whatever for you, or you're a rebuilding team, which, hey, then a 26 first isn't all that bad. But I want something of substance sooner in this deal. I want something that's a player that's going to touch the field this year, a pick that's going to be at least a 25 pick, whatever the case is. And, you know, as much as I like TJ Hawkinson, it's just unlikely we see him early. Questions with this offense stemming from quarterback. We touched on that in the last podcast as well. The pick is until 2026. I just want something sooner. Give me a healthy player equivalent to that 26 first worth of value. Ultimately, I fall back on, I feel like it is an overpay in a non-tight end premium league to go from Sam Laporta to tear down to TJ Hawkinson and get a first on top of him. That's tough. I mean, as much as I love Sam Laporta, as much as the next guy, but that's a tough pill to swallow, in my opinion. Mike, go ahead with your thoughts here.
Let me ask you this. What if it was Trey McBride in a first? Would that move your needle a little bit more there? Tight end 7 last year?
I still think that's a bit of an overpay.
Okay.
But I think it would be more appropriate or more, it'd be more interesting because of the player should be good to go. You know, honestly, I think depending on who you talk to, Mark Andrews might be lower in their dynasty ranks than a lot of these young bucks. Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, TJ Hawkinson, even still possibly. So if you can get Mark Andrews and any first, great. Again, it's still probably an overpay. You know, it should be, if you're shifting to a tight end in the top 5, it should probably be a second. In a non-tight end premium, I struggle with this one. Moving off Sam Laporta for that much. But if you're trying to buy elite players, and that's one thing we haven't, talked about enough yet, is you might have to overpay.
That's true.
These elite players. So
that is true.
It could just be that's fact of the matter is what it is.
You said something in the last pod too, where we need to stop thinking so far out when it comes to dynasty. You're talking about a player specifically like Mark Andrews. And, I think we have this mindset of, well, if I draft this player or trade for this player, I could have him the rest of his career. Realistically, how often do you do that on your fantasy?
I never do that.
I mean, here's the thing. I might go in and say, great, I got this guy. I'm going to roll him out until he can't go anymore. And then I get a great trade offer. It's like, you're gone, buddy, because now I got this guy who I'm going to have on my team forever. So we got to stop thinking about that. And Mark Andrews might be, there's always a realm of possibility where Mark Andrews better this year than Sam Laporta. And let's not forget, had TJ Hawkinson not gotten hurt, he probably would have finished as the tight end 1. Sam Laporta with 10 touchdowns as opposed to TJ Hawkinson's 5. But Hawkinson, more targets, more receptions, more yards, and more points per game, 14.6 to Sam Laporta's 14.1. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. You've lost the game by half a point out there. You've all done it.
I know I have.
But for me, I think, it's fair because you got to overpay for those elite guys. But I would like a sooner pick. I hate waiting 2 years for picks. This is Superflex League, 12 teams, start 9, PPR. And this one has a half-point tight end premium on it. And this is Sam Laporta for Nico Collins and a 25 first. Kind of like this one a little bit better just because Nico Collins could be a top 10 wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that's a bit high of an expectation for Nico this season, at least with Diggs coming to town. But so I think this one's a bit light for me being a tight end premium. You know, and I don't see Nico being higher than a wide receiver 2, which still isn't bad. Like, let's not say that a wide receiver 2 is a bad season,
No,
especially for somebody who's valued as a wide receiver 2. That's on par. That's good enough for me. So I don't know. I have a tough time with this one again. You know, maybe if I was getting a similar value tight end, maybe, or again, this is one where it depends on my tight end situation.
Yeah.
I don't know, but this is probably close to what you have to pay. I think you probably need to be willing to throw on a second or swap out a tight end. And a tight end premium, it's hard to move tight ends without, or it's hard to get a tight end without moving one. So that's something you might have to consider, is throwing in even like a Chico Conquo, who I keep throwing out as my low value tight end 2 that I just throw into deals. It's always the first name that comes to mind. I don't know why, but it is. I apologize.
Last year, 54 catches, 528 yards, and a touchdown.
Yippee.
Up those touchdown numbers to at least like 4 or 5. 10 would be nice, but he's no Sam Laporta. Come on. Sam Laporta, the only tight end last year with double-digit touchdowns. And in case you guys are wondering, George Kittle, the only tight end over 1,000 yards receiving last year, he finished as tight end 5 in a PPR format. So I do like this one a little bit better, just because you're getting, you know, what I feel could be a really, really high-end wide receiver. And even if he's a high-end wide receiver too, that's good. But I would like a little bit more on top of that as well. And it's really hard trading across positions, because then your values just go completely bonkers. All right, let's get to the next one, Bob. Let's talk about a guy who could very well finish as the running back 1 overall. So let's set it up. Superflex, 12 teams, start 10 PPR, half-point tight end premium, CMC for DK Metcalf, Trey McBride, and a 25-second. So a wide receiver 2, a tight end 1, and a 25-second. Again, a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, I ultimately don't hate this return, given the league settings being start 10, tight end premium. You want to focus on some depth. Tight ends matter a lot more. Trey McBride's a solid tight end. This is a nice volume return. There's a lot of pieces you're getting back to kind of make up for losing Christian McCaffrey. You can do a lot with these pieces that you're getting in return.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get out on Christian McCaffrey, you could definitely do worse. Now, could you do better? You probably could. You know, if I had to tweak something, maybe chase a slightly better wide receiver or a slightly better tight end. But otherwise, I don't hate this return, ultimately. If I'm just looking to get out on Christian McCaffrey, buy some time, if I'm concerned with, you know, we know running backs that hit over 300 carries in a season, or, you know, have some cause for concern, likely to possibly get injured next year or just not be super efficient. Although Christian McCaffrey's an alien, he's not your typical running back. But not only did he hit 331 carries in 2023, he also added 86 reception for a total of 417 touches. So he was not a stranger to the ball last year. So, like I said, I think you could do worse. I think you could probably do a little better, but this is not a bad deal given the format.
And just so you know, he was close to being the #1 scoring player overall. First was Josh Allen, 410.9. Second, CeeDee Lamb, 403.2. And then third was Christian McCaffrey, 391.3. So he was close. He was up there. I agree with what you said, though, Bob. Could I get a better wide receiver? Like, could it be Devonta Smith instead of DK Metcalf, who I think is going to have a better season this year? Also, is DK Metcalf a buy low? Why is everybody trading this guy away?
I don't know, but I'm in.
I mean, you said last pod, this is somebody who seems to be very acquirable right now. And if that's the case, sign this guy up. But you're again trading a guy away here who's it's hard. Just like Breece Hall, this is for a wide receiver 2, a tight end 1, and a second-round pick. Like you did say, though, you could do a lot with those pieces. I would still like to try to get a better wide receiver overall, if I could.
Sure.
But let's talk about trade 2. I'll set up for you again. Superflex 12-team, start 10 PPR, and this is a full point tight end premium. And the trade is Christian McCaffrey for Jonathan Taylor and a 25 first. Now we're talking running back to running back. But what's that offense?
I can work with this.
Yeah. What's that offense going to look like? We still don't really know. We haven't had a full season of Anthony Richardson. Jonathan Taylor's been a little banged up here and there. I think I want a little bit more if I could get it. Like you said, it doesn't hurt to ask. What's the worst thing that happens? You keep Christian McCaffrey? Oh, no. Don't do that to me. But what are your thoughts here, Bob?
Yeah, I can definitely live with this return. If I'm replacing 75% or more of the running back I'm losing, getting Jonathan Taylor in place of Christian McCaffrey, getting younger, and I get to add a first-round pick, yeah, I'm happy with this. And you know, touching back on the Christian McCaffrey injury, I'm not going to bank on him getting injured or being less efficient, but hey, there's some rationale for worry. He's also getting on in years. I don't want to speak it into existence or anything like that, but you know, he had a lot of wear last year, a lot of run last year. So who knows? I'm
Bob,
just saying.
question for you, when you say the 331 carries, are you including the
Total
playoffs?
year? Total
Okay.
year.
I just want to make sure. Just okay. So in case anyone's looking, you'll see 272. That's just regular fantasy season that he's including the playoffs, which is a good point to make because even though those carries didn't get you any fantasy points, they could affect your fantasy points this year. That's huge. We saw DeMarco Murray fall off after he had the big year with the Cowboys, then he signed with the Eagles. We've seen Ezekiel Elliott fall off after big years. So definitely a really, really good point to consider. Although Derrick Henry doesn't seem to be falling off.
I think he's all right.
Yeah, he's doing okay. But yeah, there are some guys who are different. Adrian Peterson was just built different than these guys too. But I already said what I thought. I do like this trade a lot better. If I could get more, I would. It wouldn't be much more. I wouldn't be asking for like 2 firsts or anything, even a pick swap, something like that. But I do like this one. And Bob, I agree with everything that you said as well. Let's move on. Let's talk about Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Jamar Chase. Set up for you here. Superflex, 12 teams, start 10, PPR. And is a half-point tight end premium. Trade number 1, Jamar Chase for A.J. Brown and Brandon Ayuk. Bob?
Crazy. In my opinion, kind of an overpay, honestly. As much as I like Jamar Chase, I think if you were to send A.J. Brown and Brandon Ayuk, you should be getting a little bit of something on the Jamar Chase side, something to the tune of a second-round pick or a pair of thirds even. Something we need to normalize, in my opinion, is getting pieces in return even when you're buying top-tier players. I know we just said before that sometimes you have to overpay, but I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, we need to right the ship here because A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, not that far apart.
It's true.
And then you're getting Brandon Ayuk for free, basically. Like, that's just, in a start 10, that's pretty impactful. If it was a start 8, who knows? I still think it would be pretty impactful because Brandon Ayuk stll probably starting in plenty of start 8 lineups. But I definitely consider this an overpay. Need to add something to the Jamar Chase side or take off Brandon Ayuk, put on a lesser wide receiver. I'd be open to something like that too. Mike, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think this is an example of, people chasing a name like Jamar Chase. They think,
sure.
And look, let's look at it. A.J. Brown has finished ahead of Jamar Chase the last 2 seasons as far as where he finished on the year. In 2023, last year, A.J. Brown was wide receiver 5, 17 fantasy points per game. Jamar Chase was wide receiver 11 with 16.4 fantasy points per game. So on a points per game basis, these guys are pretty close, but still A.J. Brown finishing ahead overall. And in 2022, A.J. Brown was wide receiver 6, 17.6 fantasy points per game. Now Jamar Chase, again, wide receiver 11, at least he's consistent, although he did have a full point per game more than A.J. Brown at 18.6 fantasy points per game. So, I think you could almost say A.J. Brown for Jamar Chase straight up is a fair trade. It is definitely an overpay with Brandon Ayuk because that's the nicest cherry on top I've ever seen. So, it should probably be, if you're going to throw another wide receiver in there, it should be A.J. Brown for Jamar Chase. And on the A.J. Brown side, it's got to be like a developmental stash type guy or like a third round pick at the most. Like if you're like, hey, man, Jalen Hyatt's a guy I've been going after this offseason to see what he could do. I want to see what he could do. You can get him cheap right now, man. You can get him for like
basically a 1-for-1 swap.
Yeah. So, but yeah, look, people are still down on Curtis Samuel for some reason too. Can you get him thrown on top? I think he's gonna have a decent.
I'm in on that
up there in Buffalo. Let's go to the next trade for Jamar Chase. Superflex, 12 team, start 10, full PPR, no premium that we see, and that is Jamar Chase for Malik Neighbors, Jaden Reed, and a 25-second. There's a lot of question marks on that.
Yeah.
Neighbors side. You know what I mean? He's with Daniel Jones, who, from what I've heard, has not looked good in Giants training camp. Can Brian Dable turn it around up there? Jaden Reed, is he going to be the guy getting most of the targets? I don't know. And a 25 seconds, also a big question mark too. I might lean Jamar Chase here, Bob. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the Jamar Chase side as it stands. Definitely need to add some more to the Neighbors side to secure Chase. Love Neighbors as much as the next guy. I wish I had him on my rosters, but the pieces alongside him just aren't significant enough to move off of Jamar Chase. You're hoping Malik Neighbors gets close to what Jamar Chase is, and this cost doesn't bridge that gap enough for me to the point where I'd want to actually extend past Jamar Chase if Malik Neighbors got close, into that top 8, top 10 even, production-wise, etc. So make it a first instead of a second, or give me a better wide receiver than Jaden Reed. I'm open to all options. In a start 10, I'd probably lean towards the better wide receiver. Just give me someone better that I can plug in a lineup right away.
Yeah.
Where are you at, Mike?
No, I agree with you here. I mean, I love Neighbors too, but there's a lot of question marks with the New York Giants offense. We're all fans of Jaden Reed here, but again, like I said before, there's a lot of talent in the Green Bay Packers wide receiving room as a whole. Will include tight ends in that, and they got some good pass catching backs out there as well. So I'm just give me the guy who I know, like I said for the last trade, 16 fantasy points per game or 18 fantasy points per game. So let's just put it at an even 17 in your lineup on a points per game basis. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. Going to finish it off with the quarterback. Man, it is tough trading for these elite guys. Houston Texans quarterback CJ Stroud. I'll set it up. Superflex, 12 teams, start 10, full PPR, half-point tight end premium. CJ Stroud for Jared Goff, Brandon Ayuk, 26 first. Bob, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I like this deal, particularly if Stroud is not your quarterback one.
Okay.
We have to keep in mind, even if you're, if you just started a league, CJ Stroud's probably your quarterback one. But if you've had a developing league, there's a good enough chance that CJ Stroud is not, in fact, your actual producing quarterback one. You could have drafted him late in your rookie drafts in his respective draft year. But again, at the end of the day, it feels like we're paying a little bit too much for one asset, even though it's an elite one. I'd like to get something back on top of Stroud. Give me a 25-second, just something to make me feel like I'm not sending 3 assets for one. Because, hey, Jared Goff is no slouch to production. I like Brandon Ayuk. I think he can put up good numbers again. And in 26 first, although it's a year out, nothing to scoff at. Nothing to golf at.
I like that. Derek, make a shirt with that on it. More Ayuk on the move, too, by the way. This whole pod has been like everyone's trading away DK Metcalf and Brandon Ayuk for whatever reason. I like getting Jared Goff. I do. If I'm moving off of CJ Stroud, I'm still getting a guy who's not 30 yet, or he might be 30, 31, still young enough, younger than me, and very, very productive. The only thing I would say is I wish the pick was sooner. That's my only complaint about that one. But, I just feel people are like, all right, it doesn't hurt as much if it's an extra year out. I feel like that's people's logic on that. So
Jared Goff will be 30 in October, by the way.
I don't know why I thought he was a little bit older. Probably because
everybody thinks he's older. He was a super young draft pick.
He was. Yeah, he was. He worked out, though. Let's go to the next CJ Stroud trade. Superflex, 12 teams, start 11, full PPR, and this one also has a half-point tight end premium. CJ Stroud for Dak Prescott, Mark Andrews, and Christian Watson. So, interesting here. Dak Prescott, another guy who I feel like people are down on, and he was quarterback 3 last year, Bob.
Yeah, nothing to scoff at by any stretch. This one, it's a weird deal. I don't know what it is about it, but I don't know if it does get me excited, what the case is, and this is probably pretty close to value, what it should be, what it should cost to get you CJ Stroud. You get a quote-unquote upside piece with Christian Watson. You get 2 studs in Dak Prescott and Mark Andrews. But I don't know. I think I need a little piece with a little more shine to it than Christian Watson and a little less of 2 years of unrealized upside and hamstring problems. Can I make that third piece Keon Coleman? Can I get all the way up to Zay Flowers, even if I have to send, or maybe can I get a little bit back with CJ Stroud, or get a little bit back with that if I was getting CJ Stroud or sending, you get it. But I don't know. This might be one of those deals I just send back to the drawing board. I just say, we don't have the pieces. This doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I don't know. Something about this deal, man. I don't love it. I don't love it as it stands. I'd rather go with the other one and work around that deal.
Mark Andrews, coming off a cracked fibula, missed some time in 2022 as well with a shoulder strain. He's getting a little bit older as well. He is, where are you
29?
28.9 according to Player Profiler. So
29 soon enough.
Let's call it 29. Yeah, I like Dak. I like Mark Andrews. Christian Watson, we still have questions about with his hamstrings. How's he going to? I mean, I have high expectations for him, just as he has for himself this year. But we got to see it. So I think I'm in agreement with you on this one. Let's go back to the drawing board. That being said, I don't mind if I'm tearing down from CJ Stroud to Dak Prescott. My question is, what are the other parameters of this trade?
Yeah.
What else is going to be involved? I might ask for Mark Andrews and Christian Watson to be removed, and let's see what else you can do to get this done. That's where I go. But Dak's a guy who I like this year as well. And even if you're scared, like, look, if the Cowboys don't extend him or whatever, Dak's going to be a starting quarterback the year after that, somewhere in the NFL. That's all we got for you. Hey, like Bob mentioned, you want to buy elite players, you got to pay elite prices sometime. But one place you will not pay an elite price, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. We got 3 tiers. $1 gets you in the Discord. 5 gets you that. It gets you bonus pods. The $10 tier gets you everything. It gets you some rankings. Gets you a special chat. It gets you special league privileges. And then you can even try it out a week for free. So we hope to see you guys there. And until next time, Bob, thank you for filling in for Nate. For Bob, I'm Mike. Thanks for listening.